June 17, 2025. The morning sun cast long, golden streaks through the windows of the Greenfield Animal Shelter. But Charlie, gentle golden retriever with soulful eyes, didn't notice. He sat motionless by the front door, his gaze unblinking, fixed on the entrance as if willing it to open. Volunteers whispered about how early he'd taken that spot before breakfast, even before the lights came on. They tried coaxing him with treats and toys, but nothing worked. Charlie didn't move, didn't blink much, didn't even acknowledge the soft barks and nudges from the other shelter dogs. His food sat untouched. His favorite blanket lay crumpled in the corner of his kennel. Something had changed. There was a weight in his stare, calm but intense, like a dog who knew something others didn't. The kind of stare that made you check the door twice yourself, wondering what or who he might be waiting for. Some staff thought it was grief. Others guessed it was just hope slowly fading, but no one could deny it. Charlie was expecting someone. He had chosen that spot for a reason, and though dozens had walked past the shelter in the morning rush, Charlie hadn't moved a muscle. There was no sign of a visitor, no sound of footsteps, yet he waited, as if deep in his bones, he knew that today wasn't like the others. Today, someone was coming. Charlie had been found 2 months ago, limping along a quiet country road, soaked from the rain and covered in dust. No collar, no microchip, just a tired, injured dog with eyes that told a story no one could quite understand. The rescue team had assumed the worst, dumped, unwanted, forgotten, but Charlie never acted lost. From the moment he was brought to Greenfield Animal Shelter, he seemed to know exactly what he was waiting for. Despite his sore leg and the unfamiliar environment, Charlie made one thing clear. Every morning, without fail, he took his place by the front door. At exactly 7 o'clock a.m., he would walk out of his kennel, sit quietly at the glass, and just stare. No barking, no whining, just unwavering patience. It became routine, part of the rhythm of the shelter, like coffee being brewed or floors being swept. The staff had chalked it up to trauma, maybe some comforting ritual he'd created, but today felt heavier. Charlie wasn't just waiting, he was bracing. His muscles were tight, eyes sharper, tail frozen in stillness. Something about the way he watched the door this morning sent shivers through Lisa, the manager. There was focus in his stare, certainty, the kind of certainty you don't teach. Charlie wasn't just remembering someone, he was sensing them, and deep down, everyone could feel it. Something or someone was coming. Around noon, dark clouds began to gather over Greenfield Shelter. The wind picked up, rustling tree branches and tossing loose leaves against the windows. Moments later, the sky cracked open with thunder, loud and sudden, followed by a steady downpour. The storm unsettled most of the dogs, whimpering, pacing, tails tucked as they scrambled to the backs of their kennels, but not Charlie. If anything, he seemed to grow taller, more alert. His ears stood upright, eyes locked on the shelter door as though he could see something or someone far beyond it. The hallway lights flickered once. Charlie didn't blink. Thunder growled again, low and rumbling, but instead of retreating, he leaned forward slightly, nose quivering. He was reading the air. Lisa, the shelter manager, approached quietly, kneeling beside him. She placed a gentle hand on his back. "Who are you waiting for, buddy?" she murmured, her voice barely above the sound of the rain hammering the roof. She followed his gaze toward the front, but the lot outside was empty, no headlights, no movement, just rain pooling around the gravel. Still, Charlie's body didn't relax. His ears twitched sharply. Then, just as another crack of thunder rolled across the sky, his entire frame went rigid. The fur along his back bristled. His breathing grew shallow, steady. His tail began to tremble barely, but noticeably. Something had shifted. He wasn't reacting to the storm. He was reacting to presence. What no one at Greenfield Shelter knew was that Charlie hadn't always been just another stray. He once belonged to a retired military veteran named Daniel Hayes, a quiet, reserved man who had seen more than his share of darkness during his years of service. When Daniel returned home from duty, he struggled to adjust. Nightmares, anxiety, isolation, nothing seemed to help. Until Charlie came into his life. Charlie wasn't just a pet. He was part of Daniel's healing. Trained to assist veterans with PTSD, Charlie could sense shifts in Daniel's breathing, body language, even his moods. When panic gripped him in the middle of the night, Charlie was there nudging him awake, grounding him with steady presence. Their bond ran deep, a silent understanding that needed no words. Then, in February 2025, Daniel was in a devastating car accident that left him in a coma. Doctors had little hope. His family, heartbroken and overwhelmed, surrendered Charlie to a shelter, assuming Daniel would never come home, but Charlie never accepted that. From the moment he arrived at Greenfield, he began waiting. Every morning, without fail, he'd sit by the front door as if he was following an invisible signal, listening to something only he could hear, because in his heart, Charlie believed Daniel wasn't gone. And now, on this stormy afternoon in June, something inside him stirred. A shift in the wind, a beat in the air, a pulse only a service dog could feel. Daniel was alive, and he was coming. At exactly 3:42 p.m., a soft creak came from the shelter's front door, a sound nearly drowned out by the rain pounding the roof and windows. Most of the staff didn't even notice it, but Charlie did. His ears shot up. Without hesitation, he rose from his spot, body alert, tail straight out behind him like a flag in the wind. His chest heaved with each breath, legs trembling not from fear, but anticipation. Then the silhouette appeared. A man stood in the doorway, framed by the gray light and rain. Mud clung to his boots, a cane gripped in one hand, and around his neck, a pair of worn military dog tags swung gently with each step. He looked gaunt, moving slowly, but every ounce of him radiated something unmistakable: familiarity. Daniel. Before anyone could speak, Charlie let out a sharp bark, his first in weeks, and then another, louder, wilder. His paws scrambled against the tile as he launched himself forward, a blur of golden fur and uncontainable joy. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause to be sure. He knew. Daniel dropped his cane as Charlie collided into him, knocking him back a step, but the veteran didn't care. He fell to his knees, wrapping both arms around the dog that had never stopped waiting. Rain soaked their clothes, their fur, their faces, but no one moved to interrupt. Charlie whimpered softly, licking Daniel's hands, his face, as if trying to confirm he was real. The shelter stood frozen, watching a miracle unfold at their front door. Gasps echoed through the shelter corridor. A few volunteers clutched each other's arms, tears welling in their eyes as they witnessed what felt less like a reunion and more like a sacred moment. Daniel's cane clattered to the floor, forgotten, as he dropped to his knees. Charlie crashed into him like a wave, licking, whining, his entire body trembling with joy. He pressed into Daniel's chest, burying his face as though trying to melt into him, to erase every second of separation. "You waited," Daniel whispered, his voice broken and hoarse, tears streaming down his face. He clutched Charlie like a lifeline, like the only thing keeping him from collapsing completely. Charlie whimpered in response, tail wagging so hard it slapped against the floor like a drumbeat of joy and disbelief. Shelter manager Lisa stepped forward cautiously, her voice quiet, reverent. You know this dog?" Daniel nodded slowly, eyes locked on Charlie. "He's my reason for living," he said, barely able to finish the sentence. His hands ran through Charlie's fur as if afraid it would disappear. "I wouldn't have made it without him." No one spoke after that. Even the other dogs, normally barking and howling at the sound of strangers, fell strangely silent. It was as if the entire shelter paused to honor what they were witnessing. A moment stitched together by loyalty, pain, and love that had defied time, distance, and even the shadow of death. Later that evening, as the storm quieted and the shelter grew still, Daniel sat in the staff room wrapped in a blanket, a steaming cup of tea cradled in his hands. Charlie lay curled at his feet, head resting on Daniel's boot, eyes closed in peaceful contentment for the first time in months. Lisa sat across from them, listening quietly as Daniel finally spoke. He explained it all in a low, tired voice. The accident had left him in a coma for weeks. He remembered nothing of the crash, just darkness, then the slow, painful process of waking up in a hospital bed. The first thing he asked for was Charlie. Nurses couldn't give him an answer, but a compassionate social worker had tracked Charlie through a patchwork of shelter intake forms and notes. When Daniel learned where Charlie was, he didn't wait. "I got out of that bed the moment the doctor said I could stand," Daniel said with a faint, crooked smile. "Didn't care how weak I was. I just had to get to him." Lisa listened with quiet eyes. She glanced down at Charlie, then back at Daniel. "You didn't think he'd remember you?" Daniel looked up, eyes tired but bright with emotion. "No, after everything, I didn't think he would." Lisa smiled gently, her voice soft but certain. "He never forgot." Not for a second. Daniel looked down at Charlie again, who thumped his tail gently in response. No words needed. Their bond had never broken. Not even once. That evening, as the last drops of rain disappeared and the clouds began to part, Charlie walked out the shelter doors for the final time. No tugging leash, no hesitant glances, just a quiet, steady pace beside the man he had never stopped believing would return. Daniel moved slowly, still recovering, but Charlie adjusted instinctively, step for step, never leaving his side. It wasn't the kind of exit that needed a goodbye or fanfare. It felt right, like a story coming full circle. They passed under the shelter's old wooden archway, just as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a soft golden light over the gravel lot. The storm was gone, and in its place was a calm, sacred stillness. Lisa stood at the doorway, watching them disappear down the road, tears in her eyes and a smile she couldn't hide. Back inside, the shelter's logbook remained open at the front desk. Lisa picked up a pen, stared at the entry for Charlie, and wrote a single line beside his name. Adopted himself home, waited until love walked in. She closed the book softly, knowing she'd never forget the date, June 17, 2025. The day a dog's loyalty proved deeper than time, and the day love, despite everything, found its way back home.